Hello, hi, welcome, and thank you for joining our breakout session on property management and technology. My name is Edie Kohler. I am a senior general manager with Lincoln Property Company and have about 35 years in commercial real estate in the Midwest. We have a dynamic panel today ready to talk about all aspects of technology from the user property management perspective, as well as a number of industry professionals on technology. On our panel today, Carrie Zarzinski, Senior Vice President, Midwest Region with NAI Hiffman, Thomas Petrignana, Vice President, Melco Communications, Mohammed Nimar, Area Vice President of Sales, North Central, Connectivity Wireless, Mike Hayford, Director of Business Development, Castle Systems, and Thomas McElroy, CEO of Level 1 Global Solutions. With that, I would like to turn it over to Carrie to talk a little bit about her perspective from property management real estate perspective on technology, impact, evolution, wants, needs, COVID impact, etc. Carrie?
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. It looks like we're just starting the video. There we go. You know, it's interesting when we talk about technology and we, you know, had such great conversations prepping for this discussion. And some of the things that we talked about is there's so many ways that technology impacts real estate, from those of us as property managers looking for, you know, the new AI that's out there for lease abstraction, for example, to the building operations with QR codes, you know, on equipment, to the variety of different things that we saw that came out of COVID with touchless, you know, elevator buttons using your feet, for example. There's just so many different things that we look at. And, you know, I've been fortunate enough to be in this business for over 20 years. So I remember when we still took notes on notepads, that carbon copies that we would have to hand out to the managers instead of having, you know, the email and the work order systems, or going back to pagers instead of the smartphones that we have now today. I always joke that one of my favorite moments was when the pagers could write out what the message was. Was really exciting because you didn't have to call back the number to find out what was going on. So it's amazing to think how far we've come from those days to today. And I think as property managers, we're really looking for, you know, ways to be more efficient, to be more timely in the way we respond to our tenants, to our clients, to be real time. And so one of the things we've done as a company is we have a person who's really specifically, and it's not me, focused on the technology and the new product that's out there, but we also have a task force because we're really big in believing that all of our people have a lot of value to add. So people have an opportunity to join that. And that task force meets regularly and talks through the technology we have, the new technology that's out there, and what we really think would be valuable. So it's, you know, I think it's an evolving subject matter would be the way I would put it. I think it's been for a long time. I'll fully admit that I had shared earlier on in this conversation with everybody that, you know, it feels like it stalled a little bit, and then COVID kind of kicked it up into gear again because there were things we needed to look for from a touchless perspective, or the way to communicate more remotely because of the way that we were operating. But excited for this panel and to hear what everybody has to say about all the new technologies that are coming to the market and what's going to change for us as we head into 2022 and beyond.
Thanks, Carrie. Who would like to start, you know, kind of laying the framework for technology?
So I can go ahead and start with that. So Michael Hayford with Castle Systems. Appreciate everybody attending, and thank you, RE Journals, for putting this on. You know, this, I'm going to try and be succinct here. When we talk about technology, you know, one of the things that is fascinating is technology is an amazingly broad term, right? When you talk, you know, kind of the new buzzword we talked about was prop tech, right? What's this prop tech is the new gold rush, right? But technology is such an amazingly broad term that depending on what your specific market is, the technologies can be different. What I can tell you is historically, Castle, we focused on on security solutions, so access control, camera video surveillance, for the commercial real estate industry. And what we've experienced in the last, 4 to 5 years is that those lines are starting to blur. And what's happening is we're starting to see more and more technologies coming to the marketplace. And those technologies are really great, and they're very helpful to commercial real estate. But at the same time, what they're doing is they kind of confuse the marketplace, and what you end up with is 3, 4, 5, 6 different pieces of technology that all kind of overlap in one way or the other. And you end up with 5 or 6 different apps on your phone that all kind of do similar things. And it just gets really kind of clunky and confusing. And what happens is the marketplace then becomes adverse to technology because it's too difficult to manage. So there's really 4 things that I want to touch base on briefly, and then I will shut up and let everybody kind of throw their 2 cents in. When you talk about technology today, prop tech technology, it really comes down to a single pane of glass is a term that you will widely hear. And that single pane of glass, what that does is it's essentially taking all of those disparate software applications, right? And it's bringing them into a single truth, right? A single platform, a single cloud-based platform, a single app on your smart device. And it's integrating all of those, again, disparate solutions into one source of truth. And it's really hard to do that. The other thing is, the value of technology is how does that hardware and software kind of supplement the cost of human interaction, and also help to kind of reduce that total cost of ownership and reduce the amount of errors that inherently come into play whenever a human does a job, right? The ability to allow employees to be more productive and to increase satisfaction, employee satisfaction, tenant satisfaction, resident satisfaction, all of those are kind of the goal of merging these disparate systems into one pane of glass. Where the marketplace is today, and Carrie hit a bullseye on this, is, it's all about safety and COVID protocols and how do we get back to work. The latest poll that Castle has, so we have a national reach, and we track what the occupancy levels are throughout all of our client sites throughout the country. And the last poll last week came out to be about a 17% occupancy rate in commercial office spaces, which is very much down from the lowest point we had with 2 months ago, which was about 26%. So we're starting to see kind of a backslide in office occupancy, and it all has to do with this COVID, kind of what we call safe spaces getting back to work. Everything from contract tracing to health attestations, occupancy management, the ability to not authorize certain people access to areas if they have had symptoms. The ability to make sure that, when your software or hardware goes down, there is a service level agreement in place to get that back up and running. There's so many complexities and so many options and availabilities for technology that if I were to bundle it all into one succinct piece of advice, that would be for if you are a buyer of technology in the commercial real estate industry space, interview your vendor. Find out, do they own their hardware? Do they own their software? Are they able to customize that hardware and software to meet your specific needs? When that hardware and software fails, are there service level agreements? Can they get it back up and running? How quickly can they get it back up and running? Take the time to interview your vendors to make sure that they have all of the services you need. They can customize those services to be specific to your needs, and that when the technology fails, they will be there to get it back up and running.
Right, that's great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thomas P., what are you seeing from like customer engagement and installation perspective?
Well, first off, just want to thank everybody for the opportunity to be on this panel with some great industry leaders. What Carrie had mentioned, what Michael had mentioned, is a great segue into that customer engagement. COVID has really forced everyone to rethink how we do business and what technologies are needed to get back to a safe and productive environment. You know, there's a lot of great contactless office technologies that are out there. Hands-free elevators, barcodes for hands-free access control and AV systems from your device. As Michael mentioned, the list can go on and on. And just to really tap into the interviewing and evaluating process that Michael had mentioned, you really need to look at the technologies and your project team. You know, there's so many factors to consider to implement the right systems, to retain and attract tenants and ensure buildings are safe and they promote that productive environment. So what we found is that just knowing the technologies that exist in the marketplace isn't enough. So as a systems integrator and a union electrical contractor at Melco, you know, we've changed completely how we engage customers and really to set realistic expectations for all those initiatives. And really, I would recommend building owners, tenants, end users, and any other technology and construction partners to really rethink how you engage and how you, as Michael mentioned, you interview and you educate yourself. And we've really focused on communication, setting realistic expectations. That's for budgets, timelines, logistics. And then what we found is a real important aspect is, especially with post-COVID, is the ability to be flexible and creative along the entire process. So, you know, we all know communication is by far one of the most important factors in anything to successfully plan, install, integrate, and manage any technology or construction activity. It's important, but really now more than ever. And it's not communicating early and often. I think a key term that we've seen, and we've had great experience with customers, that when you communicate and you're transparent and open to just talking about your needs, figuring out the best plan, that really helps set the stage for a successful project. And, you know, there's always going to be project challenges. Pre-COVID, there were challenges. Post-COVID, there's challenges. They're just different. So setting realistic expectations is really the foundation to measure twice and cut once. Sometimes it feels like we're measuring 7 times to cut once, but it's really what's needed to set the stage for that successful project and engagement. So, you know, you have budgets, critical obviously to provide any of the needed enhancements to build out a tenant space, to retrofit, to, you know, a new building, to retain and attract those tenants and workers. It's not uncommon for an end user to seek out high-end products and finishes, and then the budget match, right? So now if we add on any of these new technologies for health, safety, and just productivity in a hybrid environment, that can cause some challenges with the budget. So engaging early and often with your partners is really key. You can talk through this process, and it's not just create a drawing, get low bid, try and install. As Michael mentioned, you know, actually interviewing and ensuring you have the right project team that's willing to take the time. And speaking of timelines, they can be challenging these days too, right? So shorter construction windows, there's some workforce shortages that people are dealing with, and then just logistical issues on product delays. So really understanding upfront what those timelines are when you engage and have a productive discussion, you're able to identify any logistics and material availability problems that might be out there. No longer is it just a copy and paste, do the system that we did before, everything's going to be on the shelf. You have to find out, is the product available? Where is it being sourced from? if it's still compatible, did it go end of life? Again, communication, setting expectations are key. And then just the last part of engagement that I want to bring up is that flexibility and creativity that we've had to use more than ever on every project, right? So it's how we approach the design, the install, the commissioning, the training, the maintenance. We're seeing that, really one of the only constants in life is change, right? And now more than ever, there's some different elements to factor in. So something can change in an instant. And if you're communicating, you have the right team that you've identified up front that doesn't just have the skill set, but has the ability to navigate some of the challenges that are out there. We've had to pivot on some projects where items are delayed and extended by months beyond the timeline. So we've had to do complete redesigns. We've had to install temporary systems and really just work hand in hand with our customers. And we've had a lot of successful projects that, maybe ended differently than it was first built, but ultimately customers have what they need. They moved into their space and, had a very successful outcome. And everybody on this panel, we've been dealing with this for almost 2 years now. And, from design through day 2 support, like Michael mentioned, having the right team, having the right partners, and just communicating and engaging is what we've found has really set up companies and projects to meet their goals and get back into the office.
Thank you, Thomas. I appreciate that. One of the things that I know we experienced early in the pandemic was a tremendous burden to shift technology to be much more available at home, right? To support work from home. Do you see a shift as people return back to the office? Is there going to be another new demand on, new infrastructure technology needed at that level?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll take 30 seconds on this, and then I'm going to toss it over to Thomas McElroy, because this is really his bread and butter, right? Is regardless of whether you're in the office, right, like Carrie is, or you're at home, like secretly I am, we both need access to our systems, right? Our internal systems, our internal, databases, as well as the internet, right? Cloud hosted solutions, right? That is where everyone is merging, right? Everyone's moving over. If you haven't moved to a cloud-based system, eventually in the near future, you're not going to have a choice, right? So that cloud technology is really what gives you the ability to work flexible spaces. But for you to be able to have good cloud-based technologies, you have to have it in a very specific and strong integrated backbone infrastructure to make sure that you can access that equipment, regardless of where you are from a remote location. So it's all about cloud hosted technologies with a strong backbone infrastructure that, like a level 1, Thomas at level 1 would bring to the market.
As the segue continues. So essentially what we found in this COVID area is that you're finding that the infrastructure in your house needs to more resemble the infrastructure in your office than it did 10 years ago. COVID came all of a sudden. So you had all these people who were on Monday in the office, and then on Tuesday they're at home with their laptop computers attempting to function as best as they could by virtue of their new environment. Also, you layer on top of that, a lot of these individuals in the offices have children who were also having to stay at home from school with their laptops and their remote learning framework from their particular school districts. You add all that up together, and now all of a sudden the infrastructure in the residential building now needs to look closer to the infrastructure in the office as humanly possible. Now also you have the bandwidth needs of that infrastructure in your residential environment has now multiplied exponentially, because you have the streaming of the lesson from your children, you have your attachment to your offsite systems from your office. You're doing a Zoom call instead of a conference call, and that takes up bandwidth in regards to the infrastructure also. And we watched how all of these things were really not working together the way that they should, and understood that a new paradigm and a new framework was going to be necessary in regards to infrastructure on the residential side, especially in high rise, because a version of COVID may reappear at a later date. And if you now have to migrate from the office back to the house, that infrastructure's got to be more compatible than it was the first time. I think when you expand upon that, and you're adding the cybersecurity layer, and you're adding again the video conferencing layer. There are a lot of things that are going to be going on in this residential building that really looks like things that are going on in the office, but that infrastructure really wasn't designed for that. So now, between new kinds of wireless technology that one of the other members of the panel, I'm sure, will elaborate on, because a lot of the devices that you have, have a wireless capability in order to be able to work. What we're finding is a way to kind of augment the lack of infrastructure in a lot of the residential buildings is to make use of upgraded wireless infrastructure that could be easily added. You have a 5G infrastructure that is currently being deployed. You have a DAS infrastructure so that the different kinds of cellular services will be available to you in your building. And so from a commercial real estate standpoint, and I'm kind of leaning toward commercial real estate / residential standpoint, these are the kinds of technologies in the future that are going to need to be discussed upfront with the architect, and how that infrastructure will be designed in the building so that the occupants of the building can not only live their private life, but if necessary, live their business life by virtue of whatever environmental COVID-related circumstance may arrive in the future.
Thank you, Thomas. Excellent. Appreciate that very much. Mohammed.
Hi, my name is Mohammed Nimar. I'm the Area Vice President for Connectivity Wireless. Connectivity Wireless is a national managed service provider. I've been in the industry for 15 years across multiple countries, and I've been with Connectivity for almost a year now, based out of Chicago. So if we get one thing out of the conversation that's going on right now, we see that whether it's because of COVID, well, COVID only accelerated our growth. But if we look at it generally, we're moving towards more like what we call a smart building. What your building would look like when it's more advanced and more in the future. How would it look like? If you look at it, you'll see the building will have a lot more devices that control everything from a temperature control, the lighting, even to the elevator doors. We could be thinking in the future, you just walk into the elevator without really pressing any button, and the elevator will open up by itself automatically. So if we look at the building, if we look at it from any building in the future, you'll see it has so many different devices, and all of those devices are connected somehow, somewhere, right? So my phone right now, for example, I have a wireless connectivity. It's connected to something. So what Mike Hayford said, that everything eventually will be connected to a single point in the cloud. So think of your wireless connectivity is the highway that links all those different devices back into that single focal point that really overarching everything and controlling everything, right? Whether we're talking about your phone, your laptop, your video conferencing, even your devices that controls the environment in your home or in your office, right? So all of those will be connected to a single point. Now, that only amplifies the importance of that connectivity layer between your devices, which is the middle layer between your devices and the cloud at the single point, right? And think about that as a highway, okay? You could have a 7-lane highway where you never have a congestion, or you could have a single highway with a lot of reliability issues that a lot of those data will be lost in the bits in between. So in order for all of those devices to connect as a whole and the building to start acting the way it was designed, all of those things should be connected back to the backbone. Now, when we talk about the wireless connectivity, we're not talking about only a Wi-Fi solution or internet solution where you could probably go to Best Buy and buy a modem and install it. No, we're talking about more specific, more professionally designed systems, such as Wi-Fi is probably the most obvious one, 5G systems, private network, or what we call CBRS. A lot of those systems that we should be professionally designed and deployed. When we talk about those systems, obviously those come with a cost. We're talking about minimum starting point of 50 cents per square foot and going up, right? Now, for the new buildings, great. A lot of the people could account for that from day one before we start building the building, and we could have that in the budget as part of your deployment budget. But what are we going to do about the existing buildings? What are we going to do about the 95% of the buildings that's already built? How can we retrofit those? If you have the budget for it, great. We can just pull the trigger and deploy those systems. More often than not, we did not budget for those. We don't have the existing budget. As a property manager, you probably don't have the existing budget to go deploy the system. Now, if you don't, there are different funding options. Don't feel like you don't have any other choice. There are different funding options that we could help with, we could assist with. The industry has evolved significantly that we could adapt for those. We have answered those questions because those are the first question that would come to your mind. How much would it cost me? How can I pay for it? Right? So think about wireless, the new way of we reinvented wireless. We thought about wireless as being the fourth utility. You pay for gas, you pay for electricity, you pay for water, you pay for wireless, right? There could be a possibility for a contractual agreement between somebody like Connectivity Wireless and the property manager where we turn wireless into a monthly payment over whatever the length of the contract is, 5, 6, 10 years contract, and then monthly payment you pay for your wireless connectivity. That could be one option. And there are different funding sources that we could solicit for funding. So some of the system could actually be funded by the wireless carriers, for example. Those are specific cases, but there are existing cases where you could potentially get the latest and greatest 5G systems, private network system for free eventually, right? So correct, the wireless is the key if we want to move the building from an old style 90s, 70s building into the future building. And yes, it costs money, but you don't necessarily have to break the budget to deploy those systems. There are some options.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. So Thomas McElroy, can you talk a little bit about sort of the path that an existing building might have to take to bring that infrastructure to their building so that you could provide an advanced level of technology in an existing building, and maybe even correlate that or compare it to some of the new developments that you're currently working on?
So adaptive, in my mind, there are two types of quote unquote adaptive reuse. There's the adaptive reuse where you have the old building, no one's in it, you gut it down to its very core and shell and its frame, and then you rebuild from there. That is one way of going about adapting new technology and new infrastructure to an old structure. But I think maybe to more of what Carrie might have been referring to, you've got buildings that are old, but they currently have tenants in them and they're currently occupied. And the idea of moving everyone out of the building so that you can do a full gut rehab framed as an adaptive reuse project might be a bit difficult. So in a sense, yes, ma'am.
I said impossible, not difficult, impossible.
So in a situation like that, it's about really taking a look at the pathways that are currently in that building, what the drop ceiling infrastructure may look like, and literally marrying that more closely to what a wireless infrastructure, such as what Mohammed was talking about, might be the least expensive option in trying to do a serious upgrade on technology and its associated bandwidth for those who will be in your building and those who will be using it. Or in some cases, maybe carry a situation might be, maybe if there is a swing space in a building where maybe one floor at a time or maybe 2 floors at a time. So yes, you can't unload the entire building, but maybe if there is a model where a swing space could be made available, where then the entire floor at any one time, there's an opportunity to take a look at all of that infrastructure kind of in the aggregate and figure what is the best way to do a design and implement a technology systems upgrade, that will go for the next 10 years. And granted, those 2 ways that I mentioned have their share of challenges. When you're then, as Edie mentioned, we're looking at new construction, where really in the aggregate, you have here in Chicago, you have 5 mega developments that are going on, all of them millions of square feet each, where now you have the time, because you're literally in 5 areas in the city of Chicago, you're actually creating the smart city that Mohammed had actually mentioned. And it affords you an opportunity, because it's greenfield, to create that infrastructure from the ground up, to think through first and foremost from a technology standpoint. Chicago's a fiber optic infrastructure intersection for the entire United States of America. There isn't a single fiber provider of any size or shape or scale that doesn't run through the city. And in a situation like that, you now have the basis and the backbone, because what you have with a smart city and people with multiple devices and wireless and fiber, eventually everything that is wireless is going to have to hit a wire and go somewhere underground at some point. Mm-hmm. So with that being the case, the idea of Chicago being literally a hub of fiber optic infrastructure, where any kind of bandwidth you could be looking for could be made available. To support 5G, to support autonomous vehicles, to support wireless infrastructure, wired infrastructure, building automation and its associated infrastructure, and even marrying that with the kinds of alternative power that are going to be used to power this infrastructure as time goes on, that's more fuel efficient, that's more environmentally efficient. You have just a unique situation where you can really think through technology at the beginning of the architecture process, as opposed to it being kind of an afterthought add-on at the end of the architecture process. Years ago, if you had a building and something happened to your 25 pair cable and it didn't work, most of the people in the building could still work. Right now, if the technology infrastructure in your building doesn't work, you don't have a building. The people who are sitting at their desk can't do their job, which means the company is losing money and productivity at the time. So, and that technology, once it turns on, for the most part, it has to be reliable and resilient enough to only go down for a minimal amount of time or a planned amount of time. because it is so intricate to what the individual who's working every day has to do in order to do their job. So now there's an opportunity in 5 areas or in any new construction going on in Chicago to reimagine what technology is and to understand and have that discussion with the building owner and the developer that 5 seconds after you hire the architect, it's not the structural guy that you need to hire next. It's your technology systems integrator. That's who you need to hire next, because that person has to understand what everyone is going to be doing in the building, and then in reverse, design the infrastructure that that person at the end of the desk is going to need to actually do their job.
So can I jump in and kind of ask a question to everybody else here? Because as I'm listening, and you all know I've asked some questions as we've gone along, which is why you're referring to things that I've said. But you know, one of the things that I think, go back 5 years and maybe 10 years, when getting in fiber was the big thing. Everybody was moving to fiber. We had to get fiber into buildings. And in order to help lease a building, most tenants were looking for more than one carrier in the building so they could have a primary and a backup, right? This is how most tenants operated. So you'd have, you know, I'm not going to name the brands, but a couple of different, you know, fiber coming in. What I remember learning at that time was very often it was different companies providing it, but all still through the same fiber, which goes back to, Thomas, what you were saying, is it's all kind of the same infrastructure. So as we go into this wireless phase that we're referring to, do you see the desire to be for both that fiber that's there and then the wireless, and one is a backup? Do you see it moving all to wireless? What do you think that tenant base is going to be looking for as we head into this next phase of infrastructure within the buildings?
If I could touch base really quick, I know Mohammed's probably waiting to respond because he heard wireless, but the answer is definitely going to be some combination of both. So in order for the wireless infrastructure to provide the bandwidth and not have the bottleneck beyond, there will need to be a significant backhaul in place, and fiber is really the way to bring the appropriate amount of connectivity to a building, and then that'll feed and allow all of these different systems to work together. And then just to elaborate on something Thomas mentioned with retrofitting existing spaces, because right now that's what everybody is looking to do, thinking about how do we attract more tenants, how do we retain our tenants. It's just like with interviewing your systems integrators, like Michael and I talked about earlier. It's the systems integrators need to interview and understand performing a needs assessment of the building to check what is your backhaul, what level of redundancy do you have, what type of systems can that account for now and then in the future. And that's then segueing into DAS, smart buildings, all those other systems, but it's definitely going to be both. So you need to have the backhaul in place with some level of redundancy to feed whatever type of technology that's needed now, and I think more importantly, in the future. So, you know, cutting a corner now to just have exactly what's needed, that long-term cost is going to be, you know, multiples higher than what that additional proper planning up front for backhaul and everything else would bring.
Yeah, and if I want to add something, so the nice thing about wireless versus fiber is the convenience. So what we're trying to do is that we're trying to bring the reliability and the bandwidth of the fiber to the wireless space. Because think about previously you may have like 2 or 3 devices in the ceiling and that's it. It's easy to pull fiber to those places and power, right? But now we'll have possibly tens or hundreds of devices. So pulling fiber to all those places, all those devices in the ceiling will almost be cost prohibitive. So what wireless brings is that convenience that your device will work regardless of where it is, number one. Number two, your device is mobile now versus stationary before, right? So a lot of devices we'll be using probably will be integrated into our phones. A lot of them will be simply a simple software on your phone, right? So the mobility thing, that's what wireless brings. So the importance of fiber is still there, as Thomas Tariana just mentioned is that, yes, we will still need that fiber backhaul, but the new systems will be a hybrid of both, and the user interface will be wireless versus the connectivity and the backbone that will be fiber.
Mohammed, may I ask a question that might be getting in the weeds a little bit too much, but it's something that I've thought of. So with a wireless system, how do you provide a secure connection? If so, for instance, as you move, and Carrie's familiar with this, as tenants move throughout the building, they want their phones to be able to immediately connect to Facebook when they're on, their break or whatever. But if you actually wanted to pick up your laptop and move, most companies require a secure connection. How do you provide both within such a robust sort of general wireless communication?
That's actually an amazing question, because it was on the mind of the wireless world for a long time. I mean, right now with all the cyber attacks that's happening, everybody's thinking about security. How can I secure my stuff, right? That's one of the main reasons why a lot of people are shifting focus from the simple Wi-Fi where you need it just to connect to Facebook or Instagram and just post selfies with your dog. That's great, you're fine with that, right? But what happens when I trace sensitive data from my laptop back to the cloud? How can I secure that data when nobody can intercept it? That's why new technologies are coming. So you have two main technologies that will help you with the wireless, in addition to the evolution of the Wi-Fi. So the Wi-Fi just went through an evolution phase where it went from what we call Wi-Fi to Wi-Fi 6, which is a lot more secure than it previously was. That's number one. Number two, new technologies are emerging. One would be the 5G. 5G provides you the same backhaul, the same connectivity, and the same secured level that LTE is providing you right now on your phone with the wide bandwidth of the Wi-Fi. So you could get both the advantage of both worlds. But the thing with that is that it's so controlled by the wireless carriers, still controlled by Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T. So if you want that, that's great. That's an amazing solution, but you have to pay the wireless carriers for a subscription. If you don't want that, you could actually have your own very secure network, and what we call now private LTE. So it will still be the same functionality, as the same security that your LTE phone will provide, but it will be managed, controlled, deployed by you and your building, your venue. You own the system, you own the access, you own the air interface. That's the new technology that was really, we're talking about it since like mid 2020. That's when the FCC released the licenses and then released it to the people. That's what we call CBRS or private LTE. That's one of the new technologies that could provide you with that wireless secure connection that you need. And I actually know, I think Ford Motor Company is gutting every wire they have in the walls and moving into CBRS, for example. So a lot of companies are doing that. So even your lights will be controlled by a wireless switch over a CBRS network. So a lot of companies are actually, a lot of people are moving from anything wired to that band because it's so secure and it's open to public.
Thank you, Mohammed. I'm going to just make a general comment for anyone in the audience or that's just kind of dialed in and listening to us. Please feel free to send me any questions via the chat feature. We're going to continue talking amongst ourselves. Tom Fry just sort of reiterated that he had the same concern about security. So Tom, hopefully we answered your question there. But for anyone else, please send me questions through chat, and then I can pose those to the group. But in the meantime, I'm going to just go ahead and put that back to the group for any rebuttal.
So while we kind of wait for questions to come in, I want to bring things back to, to kind of educating, the attendees. And when we look at technology, there's really two things, whether it's wireless backbone technology or it's an end-of-line device technology like an access control reader or a camera or a video intercom, right? Whatever it is, there's really two things that we want to look at, and one is scalability and life cycle. So when we look at adaptive reuse, whether it's a new construction project, as Thomas was saying, or an existing property that we want to try and upfit or reconstruct, it all comes down to scalability. So the questions that you should be asking your development team and your integrators, to Thomas P's point, and to your design team is, what is the scalability options? Because we may not have the capital funding to do everything we want to do up front. So what is that, could be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 month timeline, technology roadmap look like, so that we can slowly scale, starting from the most important aspects, so we get the best bang for our buck, the budget that's available. How do we scale to really grow up to the technology platform that we want? Every single vendor should be able to provide you with some sort of scalability roadmap, because all of us are in that same space. Nobody has the money tree growing in the backyard where they have an indiscriminate amount of funds, available for any construction project. So put it on your vendor, right? Put it back on the vendor and say, help me figure out how to make my budget work and still get me to the end result that I want. And the other thing is life cycle. We all have experienced, I know I have certainly experienced, gone and buying the brand new LED plasma TV that was revolutionizing the industry, and then 6 months later was a dinosaur, right? The challenge with technology is it's really cool when it's the new and greatest thing, but you really kind of feel burnt when the newer thing comes out and it's kind of out of life cycle. Have the conversations with your construction team, your integrators, your vendors, and talk about what is the life cycle for those end of line devices. What is the life cycle for that technology? And as it fails, because all technology has a life cycle and end of life, as it fails, then what do we do? What's the option? How do we get it back? How do we upgrade it? How do we fix it when it breaks? How do we repair it? What do we do when the technology inevitably is going to fail us? So two critical conversations that you need to have with your vendors: scalability and life cycle.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. I do have a question from the audience that I'm sorry, Thomas. We have a question from the audience that I want to make sure we answer before we run out of time, if that's okay. And I'm going to direct this to Carrie, and then Thomas, I promise I'll come back to you. But the question is, what do you see as the top 3 issues with implementing wireless options being discussed? And that's from Shane Hennessy. So Carrie, that is for you.
So number 1 is going to be cost. That's something that we talked about in this group in our prep, was that, going to a building owner who doesn't want to spend this money up front, whether it's because of the current COVID occupancy or the reducing occupancy with people adjusting their spaces, or even if they're fully occupied, even more concerning, right? If you've got a fully occupied building and the client says, well, why do I need to upgrade? I've got a building that's occupied, I'm not trying to lease. I think that's going to be your first concern, is finding a way, as Michael just talked about, to make it cost effective within your budget. As I've been listening to all of this, I've been thinking, wow, this is something we should probably be looking at for buildings from a 5-year capital planning standpoint. If this is where we're headed, we should be thinking about it, planning for it, and getting our clients prepared for it, versus going to them when a new tenant's moving in and saying, hey, I want this wireless, and we don't have it in a building. So cost, I think, is going to be the first one. The second one is going to be exactly what Thomas was talking about earlier on. Most of us cannot clear a floor to make these upgrades. Most of us cannot empty a building to make these upgrades. So working with whatever vendors we choose to go with to figure out how to do that with tenants in place as new tenants are looking for this upgraded technology, which is going to be different than what we've had to do in the past by bringing in fiber and some other things like this that we've had to do. And I would say the third issue, which I think is going to be, one that can be worked through, but there's a lot of education that needs to happen on this. We as property managers, as property management companies, need to understand the value of what we're talking about here, which is the benefit of this panel, for example. We have to have the right partners. We all know that. That's how we are successful in our roles. But finding the right partner to help us educate the tenants, educate the landlord to be able to speak to the questions that come up. Why is one option better than the other? Why you need to have the redundancy that you need to have? You know, we have to be able to have those conversations as this technology becomes more and more important, which is something that most of us don't necessarily have that specialty in. So finding that right partner to educate us so we can have those conversations and to have them with us in these conversations to make sure we're doing the right things. I think those are the 3 challenges we're going to face.
Thank you, Carrie. I think you answered Shane's question. Hopefully he agrees. And Thomas Melker, I apologize that I interrupted you, but please go ahead.
Well, I think one of the other pieces to take a look at inside of what Carrie is talking about from a building manager standpoint is also clearly what kind of tenant. You have certain kinds of tenants whose technology life cycle might be a little longer than others. For instance, we're spending a lot of time with framing out infrastructure for life sciences buildings, where it's not only the technology in the building, it is the technology involved in the HVAC infrastructure by virtue of how many times it has to recycle air per minute, or your experiment that you're doing in the lab is useless. One of the things that we're finding, especially in new buildings going forward, is that we're literally designing the infrastructure for its first upgrade. 4 years from now, after the ribbon's been cut, everybody, the design team and the architectural team and the construction team, we've all, poured our champagne and we've all left the building and we're all gone. And so now this is about the technology systems integrator or the tech team that's in this building dealing and addressing the client's current needs. In 24 months, they're going to have to think about their next upgrade. In 36 months, they're going to have to plan their next upgrade. And damn sure by you get to the 40th month, they're going to be in the middle of their first upgrade. But you've got a lot of very, very expensive things going on in the building and a lot of very, very expensive people at god-awful hourly rates and salaries for these engineers who need, so how do you address not interrupt the minimal disruption to the workflow, but at the same time, this building is going to need an upgrade. And a lot of times what we're finding, we're now planning the design of an infrastructure of a building literally for the first upgrade. So it might be 2 conduits instead of 1. It may be a different kind of way to construct the paths in the building so that the new system can be brought up. You can figure a way to construct your cut and then over a longer period of time, back out that old infrastructure, because then 3 years later, you're going to have to do it again. And so a lot of what we're spending time with architects and developers is walking through that as the process. If you've got a building full of engineers who are always going to be on the cutting edge of something, and that infrastructure to support them is always going to change. The second thing, quite frankly, a person who's thinking about these things, or a building manager like Carrie who's thinking about these things now, their building becomes more valuable when the owner is trying to sell, or when someone else is trying, or when a tenant is trying to make a decision, do I go into this building or do I go into that building? Infrastructure may very well be the reason you get picked and your competitor is not.
Can I jump on? Because I think we would be doing a huge disservice to not touch base on this. And Carrie, again, thank you so much, because you're really giving kind of the inside kind of target that we're all trying to hit. And that, also Thomas brings up the point is, there's this whole thing called managed services. We have to, as a technology industry, we have to better educate the buyers to understand that the way we deploy and service technology is changing internally within the tech industry. We are no longer selling you a car and saying, bring it in when you need a brake job. We are now saying, here's your car, and when the brakes go out, we're monitoring those brakes and we're gonna send you a technician to fix them, so you don't have to worry about scheduling that service. Technology, managed technology services are available today. And what we need to do is change our funding strategies from maybe not being so focused on capital budgets, but migrating more towards operational expenses and not necessarily leasing the equipment, but you can pay, a fixed monthly rate for certain technologies. And your vendor is responsible for always keeping those technologies up and running and upgrading them as that new technology comes to the marketplace. So you don't have to worry about, hey, in 24 months, do I have to buy a whole new infrastructure? In 36 months, in 60 months, do I have to buy a whole new access control system or camera system or what have you? You can subscribe to a service that you upgrade as that technology is failing. So we just need to kind of change the mindset of how we fund these projects moving forward so we can mitigate the issues that, both Carrie and Thomas had been talking about.
Totally, and
Thanks,
that's
Mike.
why the term coined, wireless or technology is the fourth utility.
That's right. Thank you. We've had an amazing discussion, despite the fact that we weren't live and had an audience. You all have so much information to share, and Carrie laid, a great framework for questions and information to be shared from the property management real estate perspective. So I thank you all very much. I'm going to remind those that are currently listening or those who watch this as a replay. Thomas Peterniana is with Malco Communications. Mohammed is with Connectivity Wireless. Mike Hayford is with Castle Systems with K, and Thomas McElroy is Level 1 Global Solutions. If anyone would like to reach out to any of them, I'm sure that you can get their information through Ernie, or through myself if you wish. Again, Edie Kohler with Lincoln Property Company. I thank you all very, very much for your time today, and appreciate just getting to know so much more about this extremely important facet of our buildings.
Great job, Edie. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.